Welcome back to Season 2 of Midwest Covencast Presents Weekend Reads. I'm Marilyn of Midwest Covencast. Here in the second half of Season 2, we will be making our way through Book 3 of Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy or magic, which explores ceremonial magic. You can find podcast extras for this season and more at MidwestCovencast.com. I hope you enjoy this week's installment. Chapter 42. By what ways the magicians and necromancers do think they can call forth the souls of the dead. By the things which have been already spoken, it is manifest that souls after death do as yet love their body which they left, as those souls do whose bodies want a due burial, or have left their bodies by violent death, and as yet wander about their carcasses in a troubled and moist spirit, being as it were allured by something that hath an affinity with them, the means being known by the which, in times past, they were joined to their body. They may easily be called forth and allured by the like vapors, liquors, and savours, certain artificial lights being also used, songs, sounds, and such like, which do move the imaginative and spiritual harmony of the soul. Also sacred invocations and such like, which belong to religion, ought not to be neglected by reason of the portion of the rational soul, which is above nature. So, the which is said to have called up Samuel, and the Thessalian prophetess in Lucan to have caused a carcass to stand upright. Hence we read in poets and those who relate these things, that the souls of the dead cannot be called up without blood and a carcass, but their shadow to be easily allured by the fumigations of these things, eggs being also used, and milk, honey, oil, wine, water, flour, as it were yielding a fit medicine for the souls to reassume their bodies, as you may see in Homer, where Circe at large instructs Ulysses. Yet they think that these things can be done in those places only where these kinds of souls are known to be most conversant, either by reason of some affinity as their dead body alluring them, or by reason of some affection imprinted in their life, drawing the soul itself to certain places, or by reason of some hellish nature of the place, and therefore fit for the punishing or purging of souls. Places of this kind are best known by the meeting of nocturnal visions and incursions, and such like phantasms. Some are sufficiently known by themselves as burial places and places of execution, and where public slaughters have lately been made, or where the carcasses of the slain, not as yet expiated or rightly buried, were some few years since put into the ground for expiation or exorcisation of any place, and also the holy rite of burial being duly performed to the bodies, oftentimes prohibits the souls themselves to come up, and drives them farther off the places of judgment. Hence necromancy hath its name, because it works on the bodies of the dead, and gives answers by the ghosts and apparitions of the dead, and subterranean spirits, alluring them into the carcasses of the dead, by certain hellish charms and infernal invocations, and by deadly sacrifices and wicked oblations. Such we read in Lucan of Erichthone, the witch, who called up the dead, who foretold to Sextus Pompey all events of the Pharsalian war. There were also in Phrygia, a city of Arcadia, certain magicians, priests most skillful in sacred rites, and raisers up of the souls of the dead, and the holy scriptures testify that a certain woman, a witch called up Samuel's soul, even so truly the souls of the saints do love their bodies, and hear more readily there, where the pledges of their relics are preserved. But there are 2 kinds of necromancy, the one called necromancy, raising the carcasses, which is not done without blood, the other, sciomancy, in which the calling up of the shadow only suffices. To conclude, it works all its experiments by the carcasses of the slain, and their bones and members, and what is from them, because there is in these things a spiritual power friendly to them. Therefore they easily allure the flowing down of wicked spirits, being by reason of the similitude and propriety very familiar, by whom the necromancers, strengthened by their help, can do very much in human and terrestrial things, and kindle unlawful lusts, cause dreams, diseases, hatred, and such like passions. to the which also they can confer the powers of these souls, which as yet being involved in a moist and turbid spirit, and wandering about their cast bodies, can do the same things that the wicked spirits commit. Seeing, therefore, they experimentally find that the wicked and impure souls, violently plucked from their bodies, and of men not expiated, and wanting burial, do stay about their carcasses, and are drawn to them by affinity. The witches easily abuse them for the effecting of their witchcrafts, alluring these unhappy souls by the apposition of their body, or by the taking of some part thereof, and compelling them by their devilish charms, by entreating them by the deformed carcasses dispersed through the wide fields, and the wandering shadows of those that want burials, and by the ghosts sent back from Asherion, and the guests of hell, whom untimely death hath precipitated into hell, and by the horrible desires of the damned and proud devils, revengers of wickednesses. But he which would restore the souls truly to their bodies must first know what is the proper nature of the soul from whence it went forth, and how many and how great degrees of perfection it is replenished, with what intelligence it is strengthened, by what means diffused into the body, by what harmony it shall be contacted with it, what affinity it hath with God, with the intelligences, with the heavens, elements, and all other things whose image and resemblance it holds. To conclude, by what influences the body may be knit together again for the raising of the dead, requires all these things, which belong not to men, but to God only, and to whom he will communicate them, as to Elishai, who raised up the son of Shunammite. So also Alcestis is reported to have been raised by Hercules, and to have lived long after, and Apollonius Tyansis restored a dead maid to life. And here is to be noted that sometimes it happens to men, that their vivifying spirit is retracted in them, and they appear as dead and without sense, when as yet the intellectual nature remains united to the body, and it hath the same form, and remains the same body, although the power of vivifying extends not itself into it actually, but remains retracted in the union with the intellectual nature. Yet it ceases not to be, and although that man may truly be said to be dead, inasmuch as death is a want of vivifying spirit, yet is it not truly separated, and that body can be weakened again and live. And thus many miracles appear in these, and of this kind many have been seen amongst the Gentiles and Jews in former ages, in the number of which is that which Plato recites in his 10th book, De Republic, viz., that one, Pharos of Pamphylia, lay 10 days amongst the slain in battle, and after that he had been taken away and laid to the fire 2 days. He revived and told many wonderful things which he had seen in the time of his death, and concerning these things we have spoken only in the first book, and shall yet speak further anon, where we shall speak of oracles, which come forth in a rapture, ecstasy, and in the agony of dying men. Chapter 43. Of the power of man's soul in the mind, reason, and imagination. Man's soul consists of a mind, reason, and imagination. The mind illuminates reason. Reason flows into the imagination. All is one soul. Reason, unless it be illuminated by the mind, is not free from error, but the mind gives not light to reason unless God enlighten, viz., the first light. For the first light is in God, very far exceeding all understanding. Wherefore it cannot be called an intelligible light. But this, when it is infused into the mind, is made intellectual, and can be understood. Then, when it is infused by the mind to the reason, it is made rational, and cannot only be understood, but also considered. Then, when it is infused by the reason into the fantasy of the soul, it is made not only cogitable, but also imaginable. Yet it is not as yet corporeal. But when from hence it goes into the celestial vehicle of the soul, it is first made corporeal, yet not manifestly sensible till it hath passed into the elemental body, either simple and aerial, or compound, in the which the light is made manifestly visible to the eye. The Chaldean philosophers, considering this progress of light, declare a certain wonderful power of our mind, viz., that it may come to pass that our mind, being firmly fixed on God, may be filled with the divine power, and being so replenished with light, it beams being diffused through all the media, even to this gross, dark, heavy, mortal body. It may endow it with abundance of light, and make it, like the stars, and equally shining, and also, by the plenty of its beams and lightness, lift it on high, as straw lifted up by the flame of fire, and can presently carry the body as a spirit into remote parts. So we read of Philip in the Acts of the Apostles, who, baptizing the eunuch in India, was presently found in Azotus. The like we read of Habakkuk in Daniel. So others going through the doors, being shut, escaped both their keepers and imprisonment. As we read of Peter the apostle, and of Peter the exorcist, he may the less wonder at this, who hath seen those famous melancholic men, who walk in their sleeps, and pass through places even impassable, and ascend even inaccessible places, and exercise the works of those that are awake, which they themselves, being awake, could not do, of the which things there is no other reason in nature than a strong and exalted imagination. But this power is in every man, and it is in the soul of man from the roots of his creation. But it is varied in diverse men, in strength and weakness, and is increased and diminished according to his exercise and use, by the which it is drawn forth from power into act, which thing he that rightly knows can ascend by his knowledge, even until his imaginative faculty doth transcend, and is joined with the universal power, which Alkindus, Bacon, and Gulielmus Paracelsus do call the sense of nature, Virgil the ethereal sense, and Plato the sense of the vehicle. And his imagination is made most strong when the ethereal and celestial power is poured out upon it, by whose brightness it is comforted, until it apprehend the species, notions, and knowledge of true things. So that which he thought in his mind cometh to pass even as he thought, and it obtains so great power that it can plunge, join, and insinuate itself into the minds of men, and make them certain of his thoughts, and of his will and desire, even through large and remote spaces, as if they perceived a present object by their senses, and it can in little time do many things, as if they were done without time. Yet these things are not granted to all, but to those whose imaginative and cognitive power is most strong, and hath arrived to the end of speculation. And he is fitted to apprehend and manifest all things by the splendor of the universal power, or intelligence, and spiritual apprehension, which is above him. And this is that necessary power which everyone ought to follow and obey, who follows the truth. If therefore now the power of the imagination is so great that it can insinuate itself unto whom it pleases, being neither hindered nor let by any distance of time or place, and can sometimes draw its heavy body along with it, whither it imagines and dreams, there is no doubt but that the power of the mind is greater, if at any time it shall obtain its proper nature, and being no way oppressed by the allurements of the senses, shall perceive both uncorrupted and like itself. But now, for example, that the souls abound with so plentiful light of the celestial stars, and hence a very great abundance of light rebounds into their bodies, so Moses' face did shine, and the children of Israel could not behold him by reason of the brightness of his countenance. Thus Socrates was transfigured, as we read that in light he overcame the luciferous wheels of the sun. So Zoroaster, being transfigured, his body was taken up. So Elijah and Enoch ascended to heaven in a certain fiery chariot. So Paul was wrapped up into the third heaven. So our bodies, after the judgment of the world, shall be called glorified, and in like manner be wrapped up, and we may say by this means shall shine as the sun and moon, which thing that it is possible, and hath formerly been done. Avisabron the Moor, and Avicen the Arabian, and Hippocrates of Cuz, and all the school of the Chaldeans do acknowledge and confirm. Moreover, it is reported in histories that Alexander the Great, being circumvented and in great danger in India, did so burn in mind that he seemed to the barbarians to cast forth light. The father of Theodoricus also is reported to have cast forth sparks of fire through his whole body. The same thing a wise man also delivered concerning himself, so that sparking flames did break forth here and there, even with a noise. Neither is this power of the soul found in men only, but sometimes even in beasts, as in the horse of Tiberius, who seems to send forth flames out of his mouth. But the mind is above fate and providence. Therefore, it is not affected either with the influences of the heavenly bodies or the qualities of natural things. Religion, therefore, can only cure it, but the sensitiveness of the soul is in fate, above nature, which is in certain manner the knot of the body and soul, and under fate. Above the body, therefore, it is changed by the influences of the heavenly bodies, and affected by the qualities of natural and corporeal things. Now I call the sensitiveness of the soul that vivifying and rectifying power of the body, the original of the senses. The soul itself doth manifest in the body its sensitive powers, and perceives corporeal things by the body, and locally moves the body, and governs it in his place, and nourishes it in a body. In this sensitiveness, two most principal powers predominate, viz., one which is called the fantasy, or imaginative or cognitive faculty, of whose power we have already spoken, where we have handled the passions of the soul. The other, which is called the sense of nature, of the which also we have spoken, where we made mention of witchcraft. Man, therefore, by the nature of his body, is under fate. The soul of man, by the sensitiveness, moves nature in fate, but by the mind is above fate, in the order of providence. Yet reason is free at its own choice. Therefore the soul by reason ascends into the mind, where it is replenished with divine light. Sometimes it descends into sensitiveness, and is affected by the influences of the heavenly bodies and qualities of natural things, and is distracted by the passions and the encountering of sensible objects. Sometimes the soul revokes itself wholly into reason, searching out other things, either by discourse or by contemplating itself. For it is possible that the part of the reason, which the Peripatetics call the possible intellect, may be brought to this, that it may freely discourse and operate without conversion to his phantasms. For so great is the command of this reason, that as often as anything incurs either into the mind, or into the sensitiveness, or into nature, or into the body, it cannot pass into the soul, unless reason apply itself to it. By this means the soul perceives itself neither to see, nor hear, nor feel, nor what it suffers any things by the external senses, until cogitative reason first apprehend it. But it apprehends it when it is at leisure, not when it earnestly gapes after another thing, as we manifestly see by these who heed not those that they meet, when they more seriously think on something else. Know, therefore, that neither the superior influences, nor natural affections, nor sensations, nor passions either of the mind or body, nor any sensible thing whatsoever, can work or penetrate into the soul, unless by the judgment of reason itself. Therefore, by its act, not by any extrinsical violence, can the soul be either affected or disturbed, which thing even innumerable martyrs have proved by their martyrdom. So Anasarchus, a philosopher of Abdera, who by the command of Nicocreontis, a tyrant of Cyprus, being cast into a concave stone, neglecting the pains of his body, while he was pounded with iron pestles, is reported to have said, "Pound, pound the shell of Anasarchus," though nothing hurts Anasarchus himself. The tyrant commanded his tongue to be cut off, but he with his own teeth did bite it off, and did spit it in the face of the tyrant. Chapter 44. Of the degrees of souls, and their destruction, or immortality. The mind, because it is from God, or from the intelligible world, is therefore immortal and eternal, but reason is long-lived by the benefit of its celestial original from the heaven. But the sensitive, because it is from the bosom of the matter, and depends on sublunary nature, is subject to destruction and corruption. Therefore, the soul by its mind is immortal, by its reason long-lived, in its ethereal vehicle, but resolvable unless it be restored in the circuit of its new body. Therefore, it is not immortal unless it be united to an immortal mind. Therefore, the sensitiveness of the soul, or the sensitive or animal soul, because it is produced out of the bosom of a corporeal matter, the body being resolved perishes together with it, or the shadow thereof remains not long in the vapors of its resolved body, partaking nothing of immortality, unless it be also united to a more sublime power. Therefore, the soul which is united to the mind is called the soul standing, not falling. But all men obtain not this mind, because, as Hermes said, God would propound it, as it were a prize and reward of the souls, which they that shall neglect, being without mind, spotted with corporeal senses, and made like to irrational creatures, are allotted to the same destruction with them. As Ecclesiastes said, there is the same destruction of man and beasts, and the condition of both is equal. As man dies, so also they die. Yea, they have all one breath, so that man hath no preeminence over a beast. Thus far he. Hence many theologians think that the souls of men of this kind have no immortality after they have left their body, but in hope of the resurrection only, when all men shall be restored. Augustine relates that this was the heresy of the Arabians, who affirmed that the souls perished together with their bodies, and in the day of judgment did arise again with them. Whosoever, therefore, being upheld by the divine grace, have obtained a mind, these according to the proportions of their works become immortal, as Hermes said, having comprehended all things by their understanding, which are in the earth, and in the sea, and in the heavens, and if there be anything besides these above heaven, so that they behold even goodness itself. But they who have lived a middle life, though they have not obtained the divine intelligence, but a certain rational intelligence of it, these men's souls, when they shall depart from their bodies, are bound over to certain secret receptacles, where they are affected with sensitive powers, and are exercised in a certain kind of act, and by imagination, and the irascible and concupiscible virtues do either extremely rejoice or grievously lament. Of which opinion St. Augustine also was, in his book which he wrote of the spirit and soul. The wise men of the Indians, Persians, Egyptians, and Chaldeans have delivered that this soul survives much longer than its body, yet that it is not made altogether immortal, unless by transmigration. But our theologians do philosophize far otherwise concerning these things, that although there be the same common original and beginning of all souls, yet they are distinguished by the Creator with diverse degrees, not only accidental, but also intrinsically, founded in their very essence, by the which the soul differs from another. By that which is proper to itself, which opinion John Scotus also holds, and the Parisian theologians have so decreed in their articles. Hence the wise man said, I was an ingenious child, and obtained a good soul, viz., a better than many others. And according to this inequality of souls, everyone is capable in their degree of their charge, which gift is freely given by God, as we read in the Gospel, that he gave to one 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to everyone according to his virtue. And the apostle said, he hath given some to the apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and doctors, for the consummation of the saints, and the work of the ministry, for the building up of the body of Christ. For there are, said Origen, certain invisible perfections, to the which are committed those things which are dispensed here upon earth, in which there is no small difference, as also is required in the men. Wherefore, someone obtains the highest degree of wisdom and dignity, another little differs from beasts, and feeding beasts is made half a beast, another abounds in virtues and in wealth, another hath even little or nothing, and oftentimes that little which he hath is taken away from him, and given to him that hath. And this is the divine justice in the distribution of gifts, that they may correspond to the virtues of every receiver, to whom also rewards are given according to their works. That what proportion there is of gifts to gifts, and of deserts to deserts, there may be the same proportion of rewards to rewards. To conclude, we must know this, that every noble soul hath a fourfold operation, first divine by the image of the divine propriety, the second intellectual by formality of participation with the intelligences, the third rational by the perfection of its proper essential essence, the fourth animal or natural by communion with the body and these inferior things, so that there is no work in this whole world so admirable, so excellent, so wonderful, which the soul of man, being associated to his image of divinity, which the magicians call a soul, standing and not falling, cannot accomplish by its own power without any external help. Therefore, the form of all magic power is from the soul of man, standing and not falling. Chapter 45 of Soothsaying and Frenzy. Soothsaying is that which the priests or others were stricken withal, and discerned the causes of things, and foresaw future things, viz., when oracles and spirits descend from the gods or from demons upon them, and are delivered by them, which descending the Platonists call the falling down of superior souls on our souls, and Mercurius calls them the senses of the demons, and the spirits of demons, of which sort of demons the ancients called Eurydoe and Pythone, who, as the ancients believed, were wont to enter into the bodies of men, and make use of the voices and tongues for the prediction of things to come, of which Plutarch also made mention in his dialogue of the causes of defect of oracles. But Cicero, following the Stoics, affirms that the foreknowing of future things belongs only to the gods. And Ptolemy, the astrologer, said that they only that are inspired with a deity foretell particular things. To these Peter the apostle consents, saying prophesying is not made according to the will of man, but holy men spoke as they were moved by the Holy Ghost. Now that the foretelling of things to come are properly the fallings down of the gods, Isaiah affirms, saying, "And tell unto us those things that are coming, and we will tell them because ye are gods." But these kinds of fallings down, or senses, come not into our souls when they are more intently busied about anything else, but they pass into them when they are vacant. Now there are 3 kinds of this vacancy, viz., frenzy, ecstasy, and dreams, of each of which in their order. Chapter 46 of the first kind of frenzy from the Muses. Frenzy is an illustration of the soul coming from the gods or demons, whence this verse of Ovid. God is in us. Commerces of the throne of God, that spirit from above came down. Plato defines this by alienation and binding, for he abstracts from those by which the corporeal senses are stirred up, and being estranged from an animal man, adheres to a deity from whom it receives those things, which it cannot search into by its own power. For when the mind is free and at liberty, the reins of the body being loosed, and going forth as out of a close prison, transcends the bonds of the members, and nothing hindering of it, being stirred up by its own investigations, and instigated by a divine spirit, comprehends all things, and foretells future things. Now, there are 4 kinds of divine frenzy, proceeding from several deities, viz., from the Muses, from Dionysus, from Apollo, and from Venus. The first frenzy, therefore, proceeding from the Muses, stirs up and tempers the mind, and makes it divine by drawing superior things to inferior things, by things natural. Now Muses are the souls of the celestial spheres, according to which there are found several degrees, by which there is an attraction of superior things to inferior. The inferior of these, resembling the sphere of the moon, possesses those things which are from vegetables, as plants, fruits of trees, roots, and those which are from harder matters, as stones, metals, their allegations and suspensions. So it is said that the stone, selenites, i.e. moonstone, and the stone of the civet cat cause divination. Also vervain, the herb theangelis, cause soothsaying, as hath been above said. The second degree, resembling mercury, possesses those things which are from animals, and which are compounded of the mixture of diverse natural things together, as cups and meats. Upon this account, the heart of a mole, if anyone shall eat it whilst it is warm and panting, conduces, as it is said, to the foretelling of future events. And Rabbi Moses, in the commentaries upon Leviticus, tells that there is an animal called Judea, having a human shape, in the middle of whose navel comes forth a string, by which it is fastened to the ground like a gourd, and as far as the length of that string reaches, it devours and consumes all that is green about it, and deceiving the sight, cannot be taken unless that string be cut off by the stroke of a dart, which being cut off, it presently dies. Now the bones of this animal, being after a certain manner laid upon the mouth, presently he whose mouth they are laid on is taken with a frenzy and soothsaying. The third degree answers to the sphere of Venus. This possesses subtle powders, vapors, and odors, and ointments, and suffumigations, which are made of these, of which we have spoke above. The fourth degree belongs to the sphere of the sun. This possesses voices, words, singings, and harmonical sounds, by the sweet consonancy whereof it drives forth of the mind any troublesomeness therein, and cheers it up. Whence Hermes, Pythagoras, Plato advise us to compose a discontented mind, and cheer it up by singing and harmony. So Prometheus is said to have with sound stirred up King Alexander to a frenzy. So the priest, Calame, Aurelius Augustus, being witness, was wont at his pleasure by a certain shrill harmony to call himself forth out of his body into a rapture and ecstasy. Of these also we have before spoken. The fifth degree is answerable to Mars. This possesses vehement imaginations and affections of the mind, conceits also and motions thereof, of all which before. The sixth degree answers to Jupiter. This possesses the discourses of reason, deliberations, consultations, and moral purgations. Of these we have spoken in part above, and further we shall speak afterwards. It possesses also admirations and venerations, at the astonishment of which the fantasy and reason are sometimes so restrained that they suddenly let pass all their own actions. Whence then the mind itself being free and exposed to a deity only, whether to any god or demon, doth receive supernal and divine influences, viz., those concerning which it did deliberate before. So we read that the Sibyls and the priests of Pythia were wont to receive oracles in the caves of Jupiter and Apollo. The seventh degree resembles Saturn. This possesses the more secret intelligences and quiet contemplations of the mind. I call here the contemplation the free perspicacity of the mind, suspended with admiration upon the beholding of wisdom. For that excogitation, which is made by riddles and images, is a certain kind of speculation or discourse belonging to Jupiter, and not a contemplation. The eighth degree resembles the starry heaven. This observes the situation, motion, rays, and light of the celestial bodies. It possesses also images, rings, and such like, which are made after the rule of celestials, as we have above spoken. The ninth degree answers to the prima mobile, viz., the ninth sphere, as the very universe. This possesses things more formal, as numbers, figures, characters, and observes the occult influences of the intelligences of the heaven and other mysteries, which, because they bear the effigies of celestial deities and invocated spirits, easily allures them and compels them, being forced by a certain necessity of conformity, to come to one, and detains them, that they shall not easily go back, of which we read in the oracles in Porphyry. Cease now at length, spare words, to life give rest, dissolve and leave old shapes, I thee request, disshape the members and the winding sheet, unloose. And in another place in the same book, ye garlands loose the feet, and water clean, let them be sprinkled, and the laurel green be taken off from the hands, and every line and character be blotted out. Of these we have sufficiently treated already, and shall afterwards treat further of them. Chapter 47. Of the second kind, from Dionysus. Now the second frenzy proceeds from Dionysus. This doth by expiations exterior and interior, and by conjurations, by mysteries, by solemnities, rites, temples, and observations, divert the soul into the mind, the supreme part of itself, and makes it a fit and pure temple of the gods, in which the divine spirits may dwell, which the soul then possessing, as the associate of life, is filled by them with felicity, wisdom, and oracles, not in signs and marks or conjectures, but in a certain consultation of the mind and free motion, So Bacchus did soothsay to the Boeotians, and Epimenides to the people of Cus, and the Sibyl Erythia to the Trojans. Sometimes this frenzy happens through a clear vision, sometimes by an express voice. So Socrates was governed by his demon, whose counsel he did diligently obey, whose voice he did often hear with his ears, to whom also the shape of the demon did often appear. Many prophesying spirits were also wont to show themselves and be associates with the souls of them that were purified, examples of which there are many in sacred writ, as in Abraham and his bondmaid Hagar, in Jacob, Gideon, Elias, Tobias, Daniel, and many more. And so Adam had familiarity with the angel Raziel, Shem, the son of Noah, with Hophiel, Abraham with Zedkiel, Isaac and Jacob with Peliel, Joseph, Joshua, and Daniel with Gabriel, Moses with Metatron, Elias with Malhiel, Tobias the younger with Raphael, David with Cerniel, Manoah with Phadael, Senez with Serel, Ezekiel with Hasmiel, Esdras with Uriel, Solomon with Michael. Sometimes the spirits, by virtue of the souls, enter into and seize upon organical bodies, whether of brutes or men, and using the souls thereof as the basis, utter voices through organical instruments, as is manifest in Baalam's asses and in Saul, on whom the Spirit of the Lord fell and prophesied. Of these Apollo in his answers, and Porphyry thus: Phoebe and Fulgor, charmed, did from on high come down, and through pure air was silently conveyed, came into souls well purified, with a sonorous breath a voice uttered through a mortal throat. Chapter 48. Of the third kind of frenzy from Apollo. Now the third kind of frenzy proceeds from Apollo, viz., from the mind of the world. This doth by certain sacred mysteries, vows, sacrifices, adorations, invocations, and certain sacred arts, are certain secret confections, by which the spirits of their God did infuse virtue, make the soul rise above the mind, by joining it with deities and demons. So we read concerning the ephod, which being applied, they did presently prophesy. So we read in the books of the Senates, in the chapter of Eleazar, that Rabbi Israel made certain cakes writ upon with certain divine and angelical names, and so consecrated, which they that did eat with faith, hope, and charity did presently break forth with a spirit of prophecy. We read in the same place that Rabbi Johanna, the son of Jochahad, did after that manner enlighten a certain rude countryman called Eliezer, being altogether illiterate, that being compassed about with a certain brightness, did unexpectedly preach such high mysteries of the law to an assembly of wise men, that he did even astonish all that were near him. And it is reported of a certain man called Herviscus, an Egyptian, that he was endowed with such a divine nature, that at the very sight of images that had any deity in them, he was forthwith stirred up with a kind of divine frenzy. We read also in the scripture that when Saul was amongst the prophets, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he prophesied. And when he went forth from the assembly of the prophets, he ceased to prophesy. The same happened to those officers which Saul sent to catch David, who, when they saw the company of the prophets and Samuel standing in the midst of them, received the Spirit of the Lord on them, and prophesied also. So great is the abounding of divine light oftentimes in the prophets, taken with a divine frenzy, that it also seizes on them that are near them, and makes them have the same spirit of frenzy. It is not therefore incredible that an ignorant man should presently be made wise, and again that a wise man become ignorant. For there is a certain art, known but to few, of informing, adorning, and illustrating a pure mind, so that it should presently be recovered out of the darkness of ignorance, and brought to the light of wisdom. And on the contrary, there is a way by certain hid secrets, to make them that have unclean and unbelieving minds to become ignorant again, although for the present they are learned and wise. Man's mind also, especially when it is simple and pure, may, Apuleius being witness, be some sacred and mysterious recreation and appeasing, be so brought into a sleep and astonied, that it may forget things presently so utterly as to be brought into its divine nature, and so be enlightened with the divine light and inspired with a divine frenzy, that it may foretell things to come, and withal receive the virtue of some wonderful effects. Whence Iamblichus said, when the prophets are inspired with a deity, they fear nothing, for they go through ways impassable, and are carried into the fire, without any hurt, and pass over rivers. So we read of certain caves, as of Apollo Trophonius, the 3-footed stools, dens, fountains, lakes, and such like, that were consecrated to the gods after this manner, or made by that mystery, that from thence the priests might draw the spirit of prophesying, as Iamblichus in Porphyry. The Sibyl, said he, in Delphi, was wont to receive God after 2 ways, either by a subtle spirit and fire, which did break forth somewhere out of the mouth of the cave, where the sitting in the entrance upon a brazen 3-footed stool dedicated to a deity was divinely inspired, and did utter prophesying, or a great fire flying out of the cave did surround this prophetess, stirring her up, being filled with a deity to prophecy, which inspiration also she received as she sat upon a consecrated seat, breaking forth presently into predictions. Moreover, there was a prophetess in Branchi, who sate upon an extree, and either held a wand in her hand, given to her by some deity, or washed her feet, and sometimes the hem of her garment in the waters, or drew the vapor of fire from the waters. By all these she was filled with divine splendor, and did unfold many oracles. We also read that in the country of Thracia there was a certain passage consecrated to Bacchus, from whence predictions and oracles were wont to be given, the priors of whose temples, having drank wine abundantly, did do strange things. Amongst the Clarians also, where the temple of Clarius Apollo was, to whom it was given to utter divine things, they having drank much wine did strange things. There was also a prophetical fountain of Father Achaia, constituted before the temple of Ceres, where they that did enquire of the event of the sick did let down a glass by degrees tied to a small cord to the top of the water, and certain supplications and fumes being made, the event of the thing did appear to the glass. There was also not far from Epidaurus a city of Laconia, a deep fen, which was called the water of Juno, into which cakes of corn being cast, answers were given, fortunate if the waters did quietly retain what was cast in, but unhappy if they did, as it were, scorning of them, cast them back. The like they say do the caves of Aetna, into which money or sacrifices did show the same presage of good or ill, by being retained and rejected. The like things reports Dion in the Roman history, in a place which they call the Nymphs, where frankincense being cast into the flames, oracles were received concerning all those things which he did desire to know, especially concerning death, and those things which belong to marriages. Wonderful also is that which Aristotle relates of a certain fountain of the Pelasgians of Sicilia, to which they that did take an oath did go, and whatsoever they did affirm upon oath writted upon tables, which they cast into the fountains. If those things were true, the tables would swim; if false, sink. Then fire, coming suddenly forth, burned him that was perjured into ashes. There was also in the city Dodona an oak, which as soon as anyone entered in to receive an answer did forthwith move and make a sound. There was also a statue holding a wand, which did strike a basin, whereby the basin made answer by moderated strokes, whence it is read in the epistle of Augustinius to Paulinus, answers did give the Dodonian brass, with moderated strokes, so docile 'twas. Chapter 49. Of the fourth kind of frenzy from Venus. Now the fourth kind of frenzy proceeds from Venus, and it doth by a fervent love convert and transmute the mind to God, and makes it altogether like to God, as it were the proper image of God. Hence Hermes said, O Asclepius, man is a great miracle, an animal to be honored and adored, for he passes into the nature of God, whereby he becomes God. He knows the rise of demons, and he knows himself to have his original with them, despising the part of his human nature in himself, having a sure confidence of the divinity of the other. The soul, therefore, being converted and made like to God, is so formed of God that it doth, above all intellect, know all things by a certain essential contract of divinity. Therefore, Orpheus describes love to be without eyes, because it is above the intellect. Now then, the soul being so converted into God by love, and sublimated above the intellectual sphere, doth beside that it hath by its integrity obtained the spirit of prophecy, sometimes work wonderful things, and greater than the nature of the world can do, which works are called miracles. For as the heaven by its image, light, and heat doth use things, which the force of the fire cannot do by its natural quality, which in alchemy is most known by experience, so also doth God, by the image and light of himself, do those things which the world cannot do by its innate virtue. Now, the image of God is man, at least such a man that by a frenzy from Venus is made like to God, and lives by the mind only, and receives God into himself. Yet the soul of man, according to the Hebrew doctors and Kabbalists, is defined to be the light of God, and created after the image of the Word, and the cause of causes, the first example in the substance of God, figured by a seal, whose character is the eternal Word. Which Mercurius Trismegistus, considering, said that such a man is more excellent than they that are in heaven, or at least equal to them. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Midwest Covencast Presents Weekend Reads. Join us next time as we continue through Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy or magic, Book 3, Ceremonial Magic. To access podcast extras and so much more, you can visit MidwestCovencast.com. Otherwise, I hope you will visit us on social media at Midwest Covencast on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, and at Midwest Coven on Twitter. Until next time, Coven, blessed be.